You may or may not be familiar with the fictional Toronto-based duo Nirvana The Band, who have spent the better part of 2 decades attempting to perform at the Toronto venue known as the Rivoli. Their mockumentary web series, Nirvana The Band, The Show, followed the piano spoken word duo's exploits and became a cult hit in the 2000s until being picked up by Vice and readapted as a TV series in the 2010s, and now being readapted once again, this time for the big screen as Nirvana The Band, The Show, The Movie. And while Jay McCarroll and Matt Johnson, members of the titular band and stars of the show, there is a third member, the man behind the camera, award-winning Canadian cinematographer Jared Rabb, who joins us on the show today. Jared, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Hey, so for the completely uninitiated, and as we were talking before the interview, you were saying a lot of people are probably uninitiated. What is and who are Nirvana the Band and Nirvana the Band, the show?
The characters or the show? Although sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. You just sort of briefly you nailed it. We started making what was supposed to be just a silly little web show, almost for ourselves and our friends, when we were finished film school, and somehow it feels like every 5 to 10 years, the universe loops back around on us and we end up making a new iteration of it. So from web series to Vice series to now the feature film. I think it's like it seems to me that we cannot escape Nirvana the Band, and no matter what we do, we will somehow end up making the show until the day we die.
Who are Nirvana the Band? Give us just a brief breakdown of all the players and the genesis.
You got it. Well, you have it's an incredibly small team. We have Matt and Jay are the main characters. They're two. They call themselves musicians, and Jay McCarroll is a real life kind of piano savant, an incredibly talented musician and composer. He also did the score for Blackberry when we made that a few years ago, the feature film, and he's was half of the sort of brains behind the band Brave Shores, which was, I'm sure you occasionally play on the radio over there. And so Jay is, in some ways the talented one, and Matt is the insane one. And it's probably one of the hardest shows to describe because it toes the line somewhere between mockumentary, fake documentary, comedy, and sitcom. But the real, is all shot in the real world. So we go out into the real world, usually just 4 of us. During the movie, there were about 5, sometimes at the most 6 of us. And we'll shoot incredibly complex and intricate scenes out and about. And then sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. And then we come back and over the course of many months build it into whatever monstrosity you see on screen today.
Now, this is a kind of an interesting approach. You started as a web series, as you said. You became a TV series, and now recreated again as a feature film. What are the challenges when you are readapting your own material like that?
I think we were caught a little bit off guard by the difference between trying to make something that worked in a 20-minute episode of television and what works on a feature film. It's not something you think much about because we just assumed, well, you put Matt and Jay in front of the camera and everything is gold, and it is. It can be very funny. But suddenly, I think the leap from web show to television show was its own, challenge. And I honestly, I think that worked much easier because an episode of television can have one stupid idea executed very quickly, and those 22 minutes that you need for an episode are over very quickly. So you don't really need to go too deep into character development because that can happen over the course of many, many episodes. I think for the movie, we had a couple challenges. One is we knew it had to stand alone and be its own creative piece of work. And two, you don't have this multi-episode arc that you can use to develop the characters. Or even the story of who these guys are. You sort of have to pack it all into one. And then the expectation is for a movie that it goes to much bigger places as well. Television can remain pretty small. Some goofy incident on the street is enough, and that's the climax of your episode, and you can move on. And then cumulatively, you can get away with some big stuff, some small stuff, some complex episodes, some simple episodes. But a feature kind of has to have it all. I think we drastically underestimated how difficult this movie would be to make, and that's probably one of the main reasons is just the challenge of sustaining an audience attention for the full hour and a half runtime.
And then I guess as much as there are challenges, I'm sure there are joys of readapting the material. What are some standout moments for you guys as you recreated, your baby for the third time?
I think we have so much fun when we make anything. It's like we're a bit obsessive when it comes to getting the best possible version of the scene we can get. And so we do torture ourselves. And I'd say there are a lot of shoots that are quite painful as a result. Um, but the by far the best thing is the people that make it we're all friends in real life. These are, some of our best friends. And so we get to basically hang out with our friends all day and work on something that's incredibly challenging, but it's also very rewarding when it works. I mean, the fact that this is a feature film that people are going to go and see in cinemas, and that it's being released with Elevation and Neon, one of the best current U.S. distributors. It's like that's kind of like a something we certainly never could have foreseen for Nirvana the band, and I think even when we were making the movie, we didn't dream that it would get the kind of release that it's getting and the kind of reception that it's had already at some of the early screenings at festivals.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. The response, I believe, at South by Southwest was a bit overwhelming.
It was, yeah. I think that was more shocking than anything. Like, you make this stuff. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of musicians and creative people on your show, and what ends up happening is you work on something in the darkness of the studio, and for us, the edit room, or these very small circles where we're all hypercritical of the work. So by the time the movie was done, I don't think we really know what we had made. We knew that we liked it. We knew that it was the best version of what we were capable of doing, but I think we still expected it to sort of have a similar response to what the Vice show had, which is just that those who know and had found it really love it, but it is made for a very small niche audience. And part of that, I think, was that Vice Land, the television station, was in a bit of disarray by the time that show was airing and was starting to disappear. It was also only accessible on this more obscure cable channel. And then the other part of it is that I think we underestimated, for us, the way that we make the show, and the fact that it is all real people and that we don't work with very many actors. We try to get it for real, even no matter how dangerous or crazy the scene may seem. We're trying to do it, as much of it as possible, for real. I think we just forget how insane that seems to the outside world. So some of these bigger stunts that are in the film, and some of them are pretty shocking, I think we were numb to how they would play for somebody who knew nothing. And so we went down there and screened the film, and the response was sort of through the roof. Like, a lot of people telling us it was their favorite thing they saw at the festival. We secured distribution at the festival, which doesn't always happen. And that, kind of immediate festival response and buzz is harder and harder to come by. So we had prepared ourselves for, for nothing to happen, us to come back to Canada and release it just in Canada. But it was the total opposite. We were sort of pleasantly surprised, and it took us a few days to even absorb the fact that people liked the movie as much as they did.
Well, February 13th is the day that you see release across the continent. For people, again, who might just be hearing about this for the first time, what is the quick synopsis, elevator pitch for the story of this film?
Well, I'll say the good news is you don't need to know anything else from the other stuff that we've made. You can go into the movie totally blind, and it catches you up very quickly. Essentially, these two guys, Matt and Jay, are desperately trying to get a gig at the Rivoli. That has been their life's quest. And the movie opens up with the information that it's been 17 years and they're yet to get the gig. And then pretty quickly launches you into what becomes a bit of a wild misadventure through time in order to try to fix the thing that's been holding them back their whole life. So it's a time travel movie, and it's a buddy comedy, and it goes to some wild places. And I will say, for those who know Toronto, it's a very Canadian-centered film. It's a very Toronto movie, so it's a lot of fun just to see a bit of a local romp. Though please don't call it a local romp ever again.
And so for folks here in the Windsor, Detroit area, the Rivoli is a respected Toronto venue, a mid-sized Toronto venue. I feel like I've seen a few shows there over the years, but it certainly is not the be-all, end-all of music venues. Why the obsession with this mid-sized room?
I think what happened was Matt had known when the early days of the web series, Matt had known that the Kids in the Hall got their start at the Rivoli, and he was sort of exploring the idea he wanted to be a stand-up comic and get into comedy. And so I think the Rivoli for him represented some kind of pinnacle of success in the way that a naive person a naive young person might, set their sights too low. And I think for us, this kind of profound aspiration to a very low bar became a perfect sort of playground in which these characters could play out all their aspirations and failures. And it just immediately stuck. I mean, I think, if they were trying to get a show at an actual, if it was Carnegie Hall, for example, or an actually massive venue, I think some of the charm and absurdity would be lost. I think we always knew it had to stay small. Like their goals had to be very small, and the things that they would do to achieve them had to be insane. And that mismatch is always, I think that's part of the classic timelessness of the comedy. Most people have that moment in their career where they realize, like, oh, I've been doing this all wrong. And I think part of why we can keep making Nirvana the Band, and part of why this concept resonates, is that these are people who will never get there. They will never realize that they've been doing it all wrong. They will continue to just do it all wrong, and you get to kind of be along for the ride.
And now, Nirvana the Band, not really a band per se. We see Jay play the piano a little bit. We see Matt do a bit of spoken word under that, but we never actually see them perform really a full song. That being said, there are kind of a who's who of Canadian indie musicians who have become connected with Nirvana the Band, and I would assume that the film perhaps has some cameos as past materials have.
It certainly does. Yeah, you get to see. I mean, we've worked with. If you saw the movie Blackberry, there's Steve Hamlin from Born Ruffians, along with other Canadian filmmakers in it that are cast. And once again, we thought it would be fun for Jay's band in the film to be a Canadian band as well. And there's a you'll see Born Ruffians play Jay's backing band, the entirety of the band Born Ruffians. There's cameos by other really brilliant Canadian filmmakers in there as Matt's roommates. But again, these are people who are cast not because they're bands, but because they're our friends. And I think partially because of how we make it, it's much easier for us to have the freedom to make whatever we want, try things, fail, shoot for hours, and then use only a tiny piece if we are working with people that are only our friends that are down to hang out, where there's no you know there's a thing that happens the moment there's a for lack of a better term, a real actor on set. I put that in quotation marks, um, because you have to have a level of decorum, professionality. Um, the whole dynamic can change when you're trying to accommodate an individual. I think that anyone who's ever tried to make something and brings in somebody that's on a more professional level than they are might be able to relate to this, where it's very difficult to sit there and make a bunch of mistakes in front of somebody who's an idol or somebody who you consider to be a professional at a higher level than you are. Whereas we will gladly sit there and make mistakes in front of our friends all day. I think that's why bands are often just small groups of friends, because you can sit there and you can try things and you can screw up, and the stakes are very low and they remain very low, and yet the end result could be a hit record. And so I think we've just ported that a little bit over to the filmmaking process. So, to put Born Ruffians in the movie, it was nice to have a band that's actually a band playing a band, but more so, these are people that we are not afraid to be idiots around, or not afraid to call back 10 times to shoot the same scene if we have to. Um, and that's a luxury that you absolutely do not have when you're working with name actors.
And for our listeners who are not familiar with the wide breadth of your work, not just as cinematographer for films, but you've directed and done the cinematography for many music videos. And I look at the list here of your selected music video work, and this is like a laundry list of top charting CJAM artists, from Born Ruffians, who you mentioned, to Cadence Weapon, The Weather Station, Andy Schaaf, Marine Dreams, The Arkells. How does music and music video making play into your overall career arc?
I think many people that came up in my generation, I grew up on kind of the great music video makers that were making videos in the early 90s, like Michel Gondry and Spike Jonze, um, very much even Jonathan Glazer, went on to make feature films, and I think went on to make some of the most interesting feature film work. I've always seen music videos as a not a stepping stone, but in many ways an experimental playground to test ideas out, to work on visual language. There's like a total freedom that comes with that format that I've always felt you don't quite get when you're trying to just make that transition from making, say, a short film to a feature film. And, you know, once again, there's something about the world of music, I think, that is inherently free and untethered. Um, and music videos are a great example of that. They can be, I often think they're just like a way to trick people into watching experimental cinema. You already have a fantastic soundtrack. You just have to worry about the visual language. And so there's a creative freedom there that if you have cut your chops in that world, I think it's a lot easier to think big about weird visual approaches to filmmaking. And so, people like Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry, I think they took a lot of that freedom and managed to make very interesting boundary pushing feature films. I don't know if Nirvana the Band is the perfect example of that, but I do think there's something in that untethered creativity with which that even the way that it's shot, and how we approach the construction of it, the way that we try to keep it small and keep the make sure the people in the room are all unafraid of each other. um, that's very much taken from the music world. And so music and film are intertwined no matter what you do. But I mourn the loss of music video as a more there was a time in Canada, as you know, where like there was you could get essentially government funding to make music videos, and I don't think I would have been able to build the career that I have and the skill set I have if I didn't, you know, have the opportunity to make the music videos that I did. And on the flip side, the artists that you mentioned, like Born Ruffians, Arkells, in many ways, I think that they having access to filmmakers that are willing to make the music videos and pour themselves into these music videos put them in a different level on the world stage than they otherwise would be. So I think music videos are still quite important. There's just way less money to make them. And so I think that leap from making music videos to making cinema is a little harder, just because if you're used to only making things for $50, it can be harder to know what to do when you do have a budget. I was lucky enough to be at a time where music video budgets were, there were plenty of cheap ones, but there are also occasionally you would get to make one with a larger budget. I know that's a very meandering way to answer that question, but
Hey, no, we love to hear a little bit inside the process and the thoughts of the people who are making this content that we've grown to love over the years. And I guess I just want to finish things off with asking you what's next. What's next for Jared Rabb? What's next for the crew at Nirvana the Band, the show, the movie? What's the game plan now?
Well, certainly we're all very excited for February 13th when the movie hits the theaters. And then there's always a few irons in the fire where we're cooking up a few other projects. We've always dreamed of finishing season 3, which was kind of an abandoned season of Nirvana the Band. And, who knows if the movie will spark enough interest in the project to reboot that. But either way, there's we will be happy if we can keep making things. It's like that's really all we want to do is keep making projects. So it's only a matter of time before we're up to something else. Yeah, I don't think there's very few things I'm allowed to speak about specifically, but there's lots going on, I promise you.
Yeah, I've been reading rumors of an Anthony Bourdain biopic.
Oh yeah, well that's announced. That's Matt Johnson, the director of Blackberry and of Nirvana, who's the co-star Nirvana the Band director, has a Anthony Bourdain biopic in the works. So I would keep an eye for that in 2026.
Amazing. Jared, thank you so much for your time and giving us some insight into the film and your work. And we'll hear from you again soon, I have no doubt.
I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
This is DJ Me for CJAM 99.1 FM, and this concludes this very special edition of CJAM Interviews, where we spoke with Jared Rabb, cinematographer and executive producer of Nirvana the Band, the show, the movie. This interview originally aired on Productive Confusion's February 2nd edition. You can tune in live from week to week on Mondays from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. here on CJAM 99.1 FM.